Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us this morning for this week's Come Follow Me lesson with the Mormon News Report podcast. My name is Jenny Noonan Dye, and I am joining you from Provo, Utah, along with my husband, John Dye, who is the one responsible for all that you see on your screen for those of you who are partaking of the video live stream right now. As always, for those who are participating in real time here on the video stream, we'd love to hear from you where you are, what stood out to you in your study this week, whether it's the first time or the 50th time you've read these verses, or even if you didn't read them at all. We get to as many comments as we can, just as we would if we were all gathered together in person. We like to try to use this space and time as a supplement to your other Come Follow Me studies, to sometimes take a deeper dive into at least one aspect of the lesson that stands out. And we love having your participation and your feedback. I'd like to excuse my co-host for the Mormon News Report podcast, Brent Malone in Detroit. He is tending to some family responsibilities. And I'd like to welcome our good friend, our go-to for all the nitty-gritty when it comes to our Come Follow Me study, the nuts and bolts, the quintessence of what we learn all the way from California. It's Ben Bernards. Good morning, Ben.
Good morning, Jenny and John and everybody in the class and listening to the podcast. Welcome again to the Mormon News Report Hour of Power. Ben Bernard's coming to you live from California. This is our Advanced Placement Sunday School, as we like to call, on this very special day. As Jenny said, we hope to supplement your regular Sunday school. Maybe let us be the chocolate-covered strawberries to your Waldorf chicken salad croissant sandwich brunch on this happy Mother's Day to you and all of yours.
Thank you very much. Yes, here in the United States today, Sunday, May 9th, 2021, it is Mother's Day. So without getting too much into it, because we can never win with addressing Mother's Day. Thank you, John. That's awesome. We do want to just say happy Mother's Day to those who are out there and celebrating. Today, like I said, is May 9th, and we are studying Doctrine and Covenants, sections 46 through 48. The title of this week's lesson is Seek Ye Earnestly the Best Gifts. And, good morning to Randall, who says hello from Heber on the other side of that mountain range over there. I do want to say that a lot of what is in this week's study, we find verses that we tend to hear a lot, which happens. I mean, whether in conference talks or in lessons, I feel like a lot of this is very familiar. And Ben has prepared quite a bit so we can take that deeper dive today. So I'll just go right ahead and turn it over to you, Ben.
Well, awesome. Well, Jenny, I'd like to actually turn it right back to you, because when we're talking about gifts today, it's not, the physical gifts or the Mother's Day gifts, so that we hope that, whatever gifts people might receive are welcome and full of love. But I'd actually want to lead off with a question for you and for people in the class. When did you actually know that you were good at something?
Something, huh? Now, this is an interesting slide. Everyone should know here. And again, you may be listening to this on the Mormon News Report podcast feed, just audio only. But for those who can't see right now, Ben creates a number of slides for us for these lessons. And he puts them together and he sends them over, and then he and John work out when they're going to be displayed. And so this first slide, this question, when did you know you were good at something, happens to be an image of, what is that? What is that, Ben?
People doing jazzercise? I don't know. Is it an EFY dance doing the Macarena? I can't tell.
So that looks to me very much like a Zumba class. And so
that's what it was. Cool. So how did you know that was a Zumba class? You involved in that at all? Are you good at that, Jenny?
I am very good at your question. When did you know you were good at something? I am good at something. And something that I am good at is being a Zumba instructor. So when did I know I was good at it? To be honest, it was probably about, I want to say 6 or 7 years ago is when I knew I was good at being a Zumba instructor.
So did somebody come up and say, congratulations, you have a medal, you are now good at it? Or was it something that happened internally?
It happened internally. I liked it a lot, but But to be honest, a lot of that had to do with feedback from my instructor. Things like, it's not uncommon in a group dance fitness class like Zumba is, to have other students, or rather other instructors, take a turn teaching a song, leading a song on the stage, while the main instructor either joins along or takes a break to grab a drink or something. And I found out I would be called up on stage, and I found out from the woman who I became certified with, that I was the only person she had ever allowed in her class to lead a song by myself on the stage without having been certified first. Of course, I did get certified later, but that validation from others was helpful and encouraging.
Awesome. Now, the next question that kind of follows up with that, whether in your Zumba classes or any other aspect in your life, has there been a time where you have felt like an imposter, or maybe
Yes.
you were the person, and there's actually a label for this, imposter syndrome. Have you ever felt that?
Yes, also too when I'm teaching Zumba. Interestingly enough, but yes, imposter syndrome is real, and we've talked about that here in the Come Follow Me lesson. We've also talked about it. Brant and I have talked about it to a great extent on the Mormon News Report podcast. But it's something that everybody can relate to, and I would just describe it as being in any situation, whether it's professional or personal, where you think, I don't belong here. They're going to figure out that I'm a fraud, and it has to do with self-doubt a lot of the time, and also assumptions about the other people around you. So yes, I've felt that.
It's that sense like everybody else around me belongs to be here except for me, right? I saw this silly little webcomic of people that are like, hey, welcome everybody to the Imposter Syndrome Convention. And everybody at that convention is walking around with that voice in their head that says, everyone totally belongs here except me. And it's really surprising. You said that this is something that so many people, the vast majority of people, experience in their lives. So what does this have to do with gifts of the Spirit? And what does this have to do with, Doctrine and Covenants in this week's Come Follow Me? As I was reading through it and thinking about this, I realized that, it's really easy to talk about all the different gifts, and it's really easy to talk about the different things that we have to bring to the church. But the other side of that, one of the challenges that we face as humans is this perpetual sense of imposter syndrome. And if you or anybody else listening out there has never felt that, then that's awesome. I think that is so great. But for those of us that have, and for those of us that know somebody that feels like they're not good enough, or they can't measure up, or they don't have enough to offer, or their gift is not needed or required, well, how can we overcome that? How can we try to fix that? And I guess that's kind of the broader context of today's discussion, is how do we recognize and develop our own talents, and therefore combine them with God's grace and work effectively with the church and others to build Zion? But also a little bit about, like, what are these gifts and how do they manifest externally in our lives? So that's kind of what I wanted to dive into today. That sound okay?
Yeah, I think that's wonderful.
So, awesome. So what do we mean by gifts? Here's a little bit of background. We're going to nerd out here just a little bit. Okay. So as always, the language part of us has to go way back in time, thousands of years. In the old Greek words, there is a word that has just been translated by so many different things. And in Greek, the word is Neuma, P-N-E-U-M-A, Neuma. Neuma, it's the root of words like pneumatic, like pneumatic brakes. And it's been translated as wind or breath or spirit. So in the old world, people were always trying to explain the natural world around them, right? They were trying to make sense of what they could see. And if they would see a big wind blowing, like we've seen in the Western US for the past several days, big wind blowing, they're trying to figure out a reason why that would happen. And they knew that, well, if a human could make wind happen by blowing out of their own hand, then perhaps the natural explanation is something very, very big is blowing the wind around us. I mean, that just made sense, right? So the pneuma that you would see around them, that starts with life. There's got to be some living thing that is causing that wind to blow. So it begins with something alive. But then the next idea is that this pneuma, this wind, it also sustains life inside us, because they could observe that whether human or animal or otherwise, when that last breath goes, they notice that when a person stops breathing or when that breath goes out, then that person dies. Something within them disappears. So there seems to be something powerful, almost magical, about having that breath inside you. If the breath is in you, then it sustains your life. So therefore, when that breath first comes in, maybe that explains why we come alive. And this, by the way, helps explain the Hebrew Old Testament creation stories about how you could take something made out of clay and some big, powerful God that had life inside him, and he could put that breath of life inside the clay, and then it comes alive. All right. So that's the creation of Adam and Eve. So it starts with life, and it sustains life, and it can also explain behaviors when we are alive. So just like there are calm winds and harsh winds, just like there are warm and cold winds, and also just like how different smells and aromas and vapors can trigger things like memories or behaviors. All these different forms of wind or breath or pneumas can explain why people act the way they do. So if humans can cause different types of breath, and we also see different types of winds around us, on a really, really powerful windy day, it can be very destructive. So too, if there is one of those external winds, one of those God-given pneumas, one of those spirits that came into us, perhaps that would explain why we act in all the various different ways. So that's a little bit about the word pneuma. So they believed that these pneumas, it was a physical manifestation, this wind that was around us. And that word pneuma has been translated in the Bible as spirit. And they believe that it originated from some bigger being. So when they say the spirit of God or a spirit has entered into a person, that was literally translated as a wind/breath. Okay, so that's the first piece of this puzzle. So let's set that aside for just a second. Now let's talk about the next piece. To understand and to be clear about our language, a skill versus a gift. So question for you, Jenny. How would you try to describe or explain something that is a skill versus something that is a gift? So when we say you're very skilled at that versus, ooh, you are so gifted at this, what would you say?
I think my first inclination to answer that would be that that a gift is something that seems to come naturally to people, and a skill is something to be developed or learned, which is not to say that they can't be the same thing. Because I feel like a lot of people have gifts that they can then, that are in fact skills that they can work on, that they can further develop. And I feel like talents is another aspect in here, but with a lot of people often use the word talent when the word is gift. But because we kind of culturally have an idea of what a talent is, whether it's, usually when people think about talents, it's something performance wise, right? That is on display for others. Yeah. Athletic talent, musical talent, artistic talent, that sort of thing. But there are many, many gifts, seen and unseen.
Good call. Good call. I like that. I like how you described how, skills are, something that we work on. That's practiced. And for the purposes of this discussion, I think that's a great way to distinguish them. That a skill is something that anybody could do. And if you rehearse and refine it, then you get better at it, right? And generally speaking, if your skill and if your practice is productive, and is focused on improving yourself, then that repetition of multiple hours will make you to get better at it, right? To follow, Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours rule that as soon as you put roughly 10,000 hours into something, if it's productive 10,000 hours, then you will become outstanding in that field. That's his theory of explaining why the Beatles were so popular, because they put in the time. Why Bill Gates was so smart at such a young age, because he had the time programming. And so therefore, a skill in that sense is something that anybody could get better at if you simply put in the time, right? And the gift, as the name implies, is something that comes from somebody else. It comes from outside, right? You can't give yourself a gift. Although, to be fair, we're at this stage in my relationship with my wife where she's like, hey, she told me the other day, my Mother's Day gift to myself is I'm buying myself a new dress and some nail polish. So you're off the hook. And I'm like, hey, cool. If that's what you want, then that's what you want. That's awesome.
Everybody wins.
Everybody wins. So the gift, in this context, the gift is something that you can't give to yourself. You can't practice your way into it, right? There's a void or an absence of something in your life, and it gets filled by somebody else. And in this case, that gift is something that gives you some kind of extraordinary capability, something above and beyond what you could naturally do on your own. So now we can practice skills and we can receive gifts. And when those combine, that makes us who we are. And then usually it's the combination at the outside of that people see. People see the final net result of that. And they can hear a very talented pianist and say, oh, that person is so totally gifted. To which we might say, well, yeah, they were gifted, but they've also been practicing 20 hours a week for 20 years. That's the natural end result. Okay, so skills versus gifts. Now, with that in mind, let's combine that idea of a gift with this idea of a spirit, where a spirit is that thing that comes from some divine source and it enters into your body and it gives you some sort of behavior modification. So a spiritual gift, then, this is something that is totally loaded with lots of meaning. And when we talk about gifts of the Spirit, that helps us understand a little bit what was meant in the Bible and what is meant in scriptural terms of not necessarily being like possessed by a spirit, but the idea is that gift has come in to you from an outside source and it brings a new behavior. Now, there's some sections in our own church library found in the church history topics under the heading of Gifts of the Spirit that I felt really encapsulated this idea so well. And instead of me trying to recap it all, it probably made sense to just read it straight up. Jenny, could we ask you to read this for us, please, this section on Gifts of the Spirit?
Of course. In the New Testament, Jesus Christ promised his disciples that signs shall follow them that believe, including casting out devils, speaking with new tongues, and healing the sick. By the early 1800s, however, many Christians debated whether such miracles had been intended only as signs for the authority of the ancient apostles, or if they followed believers in any age. Christians who believe the gifts ended with the apostles are often called cessationists, while those who believe the gifts continued are called charismatic. Early Latter-day Saints, believing in the Book of Mormon message that the day of miracles had not ceased, were charismatic. They sought for and expressed the gifts of the Spirit in a variety of ways. And Ben, I just want to say hello also to a couple other people, Nancy in West Jordan, Nilda in Toronto, and Jeff and Yolanda in Kennewick. And also, we'd love to hear from you again, your thoughts on on gifts that that you have or others in your life have. So anyway, just wanted to throw that out there.
Go ahead. To continue, Gifts of the Spirit.
Okay. Is there the next?
Uh-huh.
Okay. There it is. Okay. The saints soon learn, however, that not all charismatic displays came from God. When Joseph Smith came to Kirtland from New York in 1831, he witnessed meetings filled with charismatic behavior and became concerned over how to distinguish authentic spiritual gifts from other displays. Through revelations given to the prophet, The saints learned that false spirits could deceive individuals who sought spiritual manifestations for their own sake, and that gifts should be used to serve and to edify. The Lord also clarified that those ordained to watch over the church would have the gift to discern whether the exercise of certain gifts was from God. Church leaders continued to counsel with each other and the saints about the purpose and proper use of spiritual gifts.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So this idea is that, if in the Bible, it talks about a spiritual gift, and looking at their use of the language, they believed that a spiritual gift was something when a spirit, this Neuma, would enter into your body, and it would bring unusual results. And in some cases, it was unusual physical behavior. And this would explain anything that was odd or uncontrollable behavior, as if you were possessed or inspired by somebody. And sometimes that behavior was really frightening. Sometimes it was physically lashing out. Sometimes it seemed like the person would be rambling or saying incoherent things. In today's medical understanding, we might call that something different. We might call that something like epilepsy or schizophrenia or cerebral palsy or autism or any type of any other things that seemed to be outside the norm of human behavior. They would look at it and they say, oh, that person is possessed by a spirit. And sometimes a person would be possessed by a spirit that would bring wonderful positive things, where a person would say something that was unusually wise, or they would have the ability to give good counsel, or they would say something prophetic, or they would say, or they would, have the ability to touch or to heal or to speak in a foreign language. So now we can see they would say, oh, that is a gift of the Spirit of God. So with that background, that kind of helps us understand what Paul would mean when he first laid out all these different ideas of gifts of the Spirit. So let's turn briefly, if we could, to a section in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, where he starts lifting all of these different ideas. Okay, so with that understanding of gifts and that pneuma that is coming from God, here is Paul that is speaking to people in this Mediterranean world that had this worldview of different spirits from different types of sources. And he's saying, these are the ones that come through God, our Heavenly Father, the Father of Jesus Christ. Would you mind reading? This is 1 Corinthians 12. Let's go 4 through 11, please.
4 through 11, you bet. Now, there are diversities of gifts, but the same Spirit. And there are differences of administrations, but the same Lord. And there are diversities of operations, but it is the same God which worketh all in all. But the manifestation of the Spirit is given to every man to profit withal. For to one is given by the Spirit the word of wisdom, to another the word of knowledge by the same Spirit, to another faith by the same Spirit, to another the gifts of healing by the same Spirit, to another the working of miracles, to another prophecy, to another discerning of spirits, to another diverse kinds of tongues, to another the interpretation of tongues. But all these worketh that one and the selfsame Spirit, dividing to every man severally as he will.
All right. So before we go any further, do any of these verses stand out to you? Anything catch your eye, or is there anything particularly important that you liked about what he listed here?
So, I mean, I like that. I like the idea that there's such a variety of different gifts that they can show up as, in operations and manifestations, and that they all, come from God. Like it said in the other thing you had me read, that, that basically Joseph, Revelation through Joseph teaches us that the gifts that we receive when they come from God, they are to edify one another. And so I really like these different examples. And it's not an all-inclusive list, of course, but
Sure.
it makes me think of, I don't know about you, but when I hear about certain things, or when I read different examples of gifts, then I think on occasion of people I know who I view as having that very gift. I like what Laurel says. Oh, and hello to Malika in San Bruno, of course. And Laurel shares, we are here as spiritual infants. Children need things to learn from in order to grow. Scriptures call these things gifts. They're beneficial surprises.
Beneficial surprises. That's fabulous.
It's very good.
So we see kind of the foundation of this idea of spiritual gifts, where Paul is saying when the Neuma of God enters into you, these are ways that it's going to be manifested. And like you say, it's going to come to different people in different ways. And in D&C 46, it expands a little bit and adds quite a bit. Actually, there's lots of different things that are added to it. And I'm going to go ahead and read this. This is Doctrine and Covenants, section 46, verses 11 through 26. And you're going to see that there's a little bit of overlap. Some things are repeated, but there's also some new things that are added to it. All right. So here is what we have to say in D&C 46, 11 through 26. For all have not every gift given unto them, for there are many gifts, and every man is given a gift by the Spirit of God. To some is given one, to some is given another, that all may be profited thereby. To some it is given by the Holy Ghost to know that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, and that he was crucified for the sins of the world. To others it is given to believe on their words, that they also might have eternal life if they continue faithful. And again, to some it is given by the Holy Ghost to know the differences of administration, as it will be pleasing unto the same Lord, according as the Lord will, suiting his mercies according to the conditions of the children of men. And again, it is given by the Holy Ghost to some to know the diversities of operations, whether they be of God, that the manifestations of the Spirit may be given to every man to profit withal. And again, verily I say unto you, to some is given by the Spirit of God the word of wisdom. To another is given the word of knowledge, that all may be taught to be wise and to have knowledge. And again, to some it is given to have faith to be healed, and to others it is given to have faith to heal. And again, to some is given the working of miracles, and to others it is given to prophesy. To others the discerning of spirits, and again it is given to some to speak with tongues, and to another is given the interpretation of tongues. And all these gifts come from God for the benefit of the children of God. Okay. So, like we said, a little bit of a Venn diagram here. And John, if you want to go ahead and go to the next one, we can see there's a lot that's listed in one, and there's a lot that's listed in the other. So, with this new list, what stands out to you? Do you have any favorites? Any things that are particularly interesting to you?
Favorite gifts?
Yeah.
So, well, I do want to say I really like how it says in verse 12, to some is given one and to some is given another, that all may be profited thereby. And when I consider that, I think of examples even professionally where, you have kind of, I can't even think of the terms for them, but usually you've got someone who is really good at being an ideas person. And that's, they come up with all the ideas all the time. They may not be as effective when it comes to carrying out tasks. Someone else may be like, I don't want to think of anything. I don't consider myself a creative, but give me a job and I'll do it. And I'm a workhorse, Yeah. And so, so when I think of that, but to answer your question, which of these kind of, stands out? Did you say as a favorite?
Yeah. You got a favorite?
Let's see. I really like, can you pull that back up again, John, please? The, that one.
List.
That's the one we're looking at. So I really like, the first one on the D&C side, to know Jesus is the Son of God. And then a little ways down, faith to be healed. I feel like these are things that I've heard in things like baby blessings, or other blessings really, but to have, you can just tell that some people, in talking with them, their faith about Jesus being the Son of God is just there. Like, it is unshakable. And to be honest, that is a gift. I think about anything having to do with languages and just the miracle of that, and I think we're going to get into that, right? But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things here that I feel like it's fascinating.
You know, that I'm glad that you pointed out that one in the very top of D&C 46, where it says, to some it's given to Jesus to know that Jesus is the Son of God. And then the corollary with that, which I find so comforting, where God specifically says, to others it is given to believe on their words.
Mm-hmm.
It's like God, as a loving parent, is saying, look, some of you kids down there, you're just going to have a super strong testimony. And for whatever reason, whatever random of the rolling of the cosmic dice, some people are just going to have that strong testimony and they're going to be able to get there. And others of you, my dear children, you're not going to have that same strong testimony. But if you can find people around you who do, it's okay to lean on them. You know, sometimes we use the analogy of the wise versus the foolish virgins as a sort of sifting of faith, to say that some people worked really hard to build their testimony and some people worked really hard to build up their own faith. And if you didn't, well, the implication was you're a foolish person. You were lazy. You didn't get oil when you should have, because what everybody is really supposed to have is everybody's supposed to have their own lamp. Everybody's supposed to have their own light. Everybody's supposed to have their own testimony. And this section in D&C 46 kind of refutes that. It kind of says it's okay to live on somebody else's borrowed light for a time. And it's kind of expected, because not everybody's going to have the same level. And that's perfectly fine. So if you find somebody else that around you that has more faith, and if you can't believe for yourself, but you can believe on their words, then brother, sister, that is good enough. And that's perfectly okay. Okay. You know, the other section that you mentioned about tongues, the speaking of tongues, this is something that I think is really beneficial for us to understand, because a lot of people in the early days of the church, they were looking for a specific divine manifestation of speaking in tongues as proof that this was God's, quote, true church. So let's dig just a little bit into what that one means. And this is another section out of the Gospel Library, out of the Gifts of the Spirit, specifically a subsection on gifts of the tongues. You mind reading for us again, Jenny?
Not a bit. At a meeting in 1835, Elizabeth Ann Whitney received a blessing from Church Patriarch Joseph Smith Sr., in which she was promised the gift of singing inspirationally. During the meeting, Whitney arose and began singing in an unknown language. Filled with the Holy Spirit, Parley P. Pratt interpreted her song for other hearers. In ancient days there lived a man, the song began, amidst a pleasant garden, where lovely flowers immortal bloomed and shed around a rich perfume. Behold, his name was Adam. Joseph Smith Sr. believed Whitney sang in the pure language of heaven. Instances of glossolalia, where Whitney's singing occurred in some early American church meetings, and though it was frowned upon by many Christians, the practice resonated with early Latter-day Saints who believed a revitalization of spiritual gifts was an important part of the restoration of the gospel. Brigham Young regarded speaking in tongues as a spiritually electrifying experience and an important part of his conversion. Should I go to the next one?
Yeah.
Okay. From the beginning, Latter-day Saints accepted the spiritual gift of speaking in foreign languages as an aid to the spread of the gospel. Revelations of Joseph Smith promised missionaries this gift, and many reported miraculous experiences preaching the gospel in unfamiliar languages. As a 23-year-old missionary in Hawaii in 1850, George Q. Cannon worked hard to learn Hawaiian so he could preach, exercising faith before the Lord to obtain the gift of talking and understanding the language. He recalled that one evening while teaching, he felt a peculiar sensation in my ears, and from that time forward, I had but little, if any, difficulty in understanding what the people said. Hiram Jensen, a new missionary in Norway in the 1890s, was discouraged when people ridiculed him for his inability to speak. he stopped in a grove of trees and prayed the Lord would give him the gift of tongues. Jensen testified that from that day, I spoke Norwegian with more ease than I have ever spoken English. And I think there's one more.
Yep, third one, go for it.
Okay. As missionary work expanded during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, xenoglossia became the prevalent understanding of the gift of tongues. The Language Training Mission and later missionary training centers developed language study programs that foster the spiritual gift of tongues, preparing missionaries to preach the gospel in many foreign languages. Latter-day Saints throughout the world testify of the power of this spiritual gift. And Ben, I do want to mention that's something that has always stuck out to me. I mean, you're a Utah born and raised dude. What languages other than English do you speak?
Oh gosh. So I was called to a French-speaking mission in the islands of the South Pacific. So officially, I was trained in French. I learned in the study of French that it shares similar roots to Spanish and Italian. So I'm not conversant in those languages, but I can understand them pretty well. And I learned that those all branch out from the same root from Latin. And so that part has always fascinated me. So I like, as we've seen in, these classes, I dig into that. I geek out on the Greek every now and again. And I especially, that helps me understand the scriptures a little bit more, because we see that there's so much that's there. And then when I was on my mission in the South Pacific, the natives there spoke, they had their own tribal dialect. And so I found that they really liked it if the pasty white guy would actually try to speak their own language. And so I learned very basic conversational skills of this simple little language called Jehu, which is spoken on one little tiny, it's called the Loyalty Islands of Lifu, out in the middle of the ocean, nowhere. So that's kind of like bits and pieces of what we do. Yeah.
And I'm going to turn here to my side here. John Dye, Montana boy, born and bred. What languages do you speak?
Spanish.
Oh my gosh. That's a little joke. He does not speak Spanish. No, he does. He actually does very well.
In addition to Pig Latin.
Ordering at Cafe Rio does not count as speaking Spanish, John.
Exactly right.
Free meal is not
Free
Spanish.
meal, yes. I served my mission in Taiwan, so Mandarin Chinese, and hopefully English quite well.
Yes. So, yeah. And my point, I mean, you've got, forgive me, white boy from Utah, speaks French, and some very obscure spoken in one small part of the planet. You've got that. You've got John here, also white boy from Montana, these farm boys, right, who speaks Mandarin. My brother, also white boy from farmland in Western New York, speaks Vietnamese. He also speaks Mandarin, but he served a mission in Texas. And during the war, a lot of the refugees were hosted by Southern Baptist churches. There's a significant Vietnamese population there. And it is no wonder that people from around the world have traveled to missionary training centers to say, how are you getting, and to use Ben's words, these basic white boys and girls to speak these languages so well? And while they do have very effective language training programs, it is undeniable that part of the success there is through gifts of the Spirit.
Yeah. That's the gift, right? I mean, people have tried to copy and paste the language training mission on the skill side, right? They've tried to put people in similar scenarios. They've tried to follow the exact same curriculum. They've tried to have the same sort of rules and programs of how you speak it, and they get different results. And one of the only explanations is there's got to be some sort of external factor that you cannot measure and you cannot replicate. Now, for all of that, for me, that seems like that it comes with a pretty big responsibility to be humble enough to realize that other people can also receive those gifts. And there are some gifts that are given to people, well, plenty of gifts that are given to people outside of the structure of the church. And here's what I mean. I talked about being on a mission in the South Pacific. So we were on this little tiny island called Lifu. It's a jungle island covered with kingdoms, and each kingdom had tribes. And we were living in a tribe with a host family. The tribe was, it was literally in a grass hut in the middle of our jungle. My companion and I and this little host family were cooking over an open fire for food. We lived with the native boys. We had hunting dogs and machetes. We'd go hunting for food and go, lunch was whatever you could shake out of a tree or pull up out of the ground or fish out of the ocean. And the people on this island were very superstitious with their own native medicine. And medicine is the rough translation of the word. And there was one particular brother in our tribe that was the most famous witch doctor on the island. And witch doctor is a very poor translation of what he did, but people would come to him from all over the island for help finding lost things, help getting magic love potions to make a person fall in love with them, help having healings for earaches or toothaches or headaches or weird things happening in their body. Before he was baptized a member of the church, he was this very famous shaman, witch doctor kind of a person, the tribal healer. And after he was baptized and after he was endowed through the temple and became the one of 2 high priests on the island, he was still a practicing witch doctor on the island. And so here comes naive Elder Bernards from Utah that stepped into this tribe and looked around and said, that's wrong. He's not doing this by the power of the priesthood. This is satanic. This is of the devil. You're not supposed to do this. And you can imagine how good that went over with the local natives. When they come in, they're like,
good job.
Oh, yeah, it's perfectly fine. And things got really heated. And I said, well, you know what? I totally know what I'm talking about because I'm a missionary and I've got the name tag. So I'm going to write to my mission president and I'm going to explain to you why you guys are so wrong. And this is totally wrong. So my mission president writes back a letter. He says, Elder Bernards, go read D&C 46. These people are fine. And I sat down in my chastisement and I read this and I saw how it says, to every man and woman is given multiple gifts. And they all come from the same spirit. And I realized, you know what? Maybe healing, the faith to be healed or the faith to heal, can come in many forms via many people. Maybe healing does not have to come through 2 men in white shirts with olive oil. Maybe this can help us understand the stories in our own heritage of women laying hands on people, praying around sisters in childbirth. Maybe this explains why I have a particular family member in my own living family who has a gift of healing touch, that for some reason, when she gives, whether it's a massage or she uses essential oils, that people with her have a stronger healing reaction than they do with others. And there is no scientific explanation for it than she has a gift of healing. And maybe that healing comes from others in the form of the words they bring, the presence they have around us, the actions that they bring like balm to a wounded soul, like that Good Samaritan on the road to Jericho. Maybe that healing comes in so much of a bigger form than what I had originally in my little naive way had. I tried to cram it into my box of understanding, and God was saying, it's so much bigger than that. And if the gift of healing can be so much bigger than that, then maybe all those other gifts out there could be bigger as well.
God bless your mission president. I love that. So we're almost out of time. I want to, let you finish up everything that you've prepared.
So this idea about imposter syndrome, kind of going back to what we said at the very beginning, how do we overcome this whole idea of feeling like we're imposter? Because if we all have gifts to bring, we said at the very beginning, it's one thing to know that you're good at something, but it's this other idea to feel like you're an imposter. And the whole idea behind imposter syndrome is this sense that I know some small thing, but what I think that others know is bigger than me. Like I feel like I'm this tiny little piece and everybody else is so much better, or everybody else knows so much more. The reality is that what we know can be just as big of a piece as everybody else. And their gifts, their skills, their talents can be large and contributive to the entire church as a whole. And what we have to offer is just as big and just as powerful. I believe that every one of us has some sort of thing to offer each other, whether it's a skill we've developed on our own or a gift that we've received from God. If we are all part of the body of Christ, if we all have a part to play, then that means we're all connected. We are all pieces of the same jigsaw puzzle. We are all threads of the same tapestry. We are all instruments in the band. We are all players on the same dance squad. And if Christianity is a call to be part of this shared humanity, then perhaps at the most fundamental spiritual level, then this means we have to start reaffirming to ourselves that our voice is worth listening to. And it is worth being shared, no matter how small. Perhaps these gifts of God are bigger and broader than just what is in this list in the scriptures. Perhaps these gifts of the Spirit are bigger than just what the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has to offer. You know, maybe gifts of the Spirit aren't constrained by priesthood or position or popularity. Because if parts of truth are given to everyone, like Joseph Smith taught, then that could mean that the gifts of God could be given to everybody as well, inside and outside the church. And so we need to be humble and gracious in recognizing them in others. And that also means that we can be confident in ourselves, that these gifts that we have exist independent of our callings, of the organizational structure, of official position, and we don't have to wait for permission to open the gift. We don't have to be called by a person in leadership to say, you are now allowed to use it. Our talents can be developed and our skills can grow and refine. And if we are really going to be anxiously engaged in a good cause, if we're going to be doing many things of our own free will, then we can confidently bring our gift, whether it is frankincense, gold, and myrrh, or whether it is a widow's mite. We can bring them all to the temple. And I love this class in particular because I think this has been a fabulous example of the gifts that John and Jenny and so many other people that have been listening in. Everybody brings something to share. And I feel edified. I feel built up when I read their comments. You know, my favorite gifts that I've received in my life have always been things that I get to open and then share with everybody else. It's not something that I just want to hoard like a dragon. It's something that I want to help give to others as well. Somehow when we try to fill somebody else's spiritual cup, mine literally gets filled as well. As the hymn says, in giving, I receive, and in serving, I am blessed. So hopefully today as well on other days, that we would be willing to look inside ourselves and recognize what those gifts are. And we open them, and we love them, and we embrace them, and we feel confident in them. And then we turn around and we give them to the world around us, because there will always be that voice of doubt that whispers, maybe we're not good enough. And maybe there will be that imposter voice that will scream at us that says, you're nowhere near good enough. And maybe it's time to shut that voice up and to find a way to take that small gift and give it to everybody else.
Wow. Thank you, Ben. I couldn't have said it better myself. I really appreciate that. And I hope that everyone here has been edified as well. I know I have, and I hope that well, I know I'm going to take some time to consider not only my own gifts, but the gifts, you know, in those around me. I appreciate your efforts, and you have a gift. We're so grateful for everything that you bring to this class. So thank you so much. Thanks to everyone who joined us. Thank you, John, for, doing what you do. We really appreciate it. Next week's lesson, we will meet back here again next Sunday around 9 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time-ish. Between 9 and 9:20 is usually when we begin. And for that lesson, it's called That Which Is of God is Light. And it covers Doctrine and Covenants, sections 49 and 50. We hope to see you then. Once again, Ben, thank you so much. Really appreciate everything that you do. Have a great week, everyone. We'll talk soon.